Yeah, we're going to be learning about functions today. Very, very nice class. And after today, I want to see you guys writing a lot, using functions a lot, right? Even when you don't need a function, still create it, right? So you can learn how to use them. Functions are very, very important. Yeah, you don't actually need functions. Let's be clear, you don't need functions, right? But you want them, right, to be able to ease your work. And we're going to see how and why you would need them. So let's come to, no, not Jupyter Lab, of course. Yeah, this is Jupyter Lab. I mean, notebook. So we're going to start a new notebook, brand new notebook. Yeah, this, and we're going to rename our notebook. Okay, so what do we name this? Week 7. Hmm, we're drawing nearer to the end. So week 7. Now, what is a function? First of all, what is a function? All of us here have taken math before, and we've heard of f of x. We've heard of f of x like this, right? Let me make this comment so that it doesn't get printed. We've heard of f of x like this. Then you have f of x is equal to something like 2x, plus 3, right? There's no way you study math, computer science, physics, chemistry that you've not seen this. So if you've seen this, then chances are that you understand that this function, even though some of us actually, I'm not sure we understand, some of us didn't like math. Some of us have proposed in our hearts that we will not like math. But then you can't be a data analyst without liking math. You have to like math either ways. Right? So you have f of x now equals to 2x plus 3. Right? So what this means is that wherever you see x here, if you pass in a number here, let's say f of 1, and we're going to calculate this together, f of 1, right, is equal to, now it means that wherever you see x here, you're going to pass in 1. And this is like, this 2x is like 2 times x, right? So this is 2 times 1 plus 3. And by the rules of BOD mass, multiplication comes first, right? So we'll do this guy first. 2 times 1 will give us 2, right? And then plus 3, you have it as what? 5. So this is an example of a function. Now, why is this a function? It's because it means this guy now has become a template that any number you insert here, right, will follow the same rule. Every number you insert here, right? These are straightforward functions. They are step functions in math, and those are not the kind of functions I'm talking about. If you're a math person, please forget about those step functions. Let's just consider this. I mean, these straight functions. Well, even the step functions, they still follow a predefined rule. They might just tell you if a number is within this range, apply this function. If it is within this range, apply this function. Please don't be angry with me. I know some of us don't like math, but we just have to do this to understand where we're going to. Right? If you have f of 0 here, it's simply you come in here and then substituting x with 0, right? So you're putting here, and then you have to multiply this with a 0. Then you add 3 to it. This is 2 times 0. 2 times 0 is actually 0. Right, and then we have plus 3. This we have is equal to what? It's equal to 3, and there you have it. So that's what a mathematical function is, and that is how I want you to look at a function, right? So we'll define a function, right, and we'll set the rules or the codes here, right? And when we do so, we'll just need to call this function and pass in the argument. This guy is called the argument now, right? This x here is called the argument because this is f of x. You cannot have f of x, right, equals to 2y here. This is not a function of x now, right? It cannot be f of x is equal to y. It can either be y is equal to, okay, let's not even do that. So a function of x will always have variables in terms of x, right? That is why it is called a function of x. If it has a 3x plus 2y, then it will be a function of x and y. Oh my god, all my attempts not to go deep, it's like I'm going deeper. Okay, let's not go beyond where we are now. So this is a function of x. I'm just trying to explain why it is called a function of x. It's because x is the argument, right? So functions we're going to be defining, there are some functions that carry arguments. There are some functions that do not necessarily carry arguments, right? So if they carry arguments, all you just need to do is to pass in this value. And don't forget, I made mention of this guy here. We can have a function in um, more than one argument or parameter if you want. You can have f of x and y, right? Which will be 3x like this. You might not really understand what I'm doing now, but when we start, you understand why I had to make this particular noise here, right? And we can also have function of x, y, and z, right? And then we can pass it here as 3x plus 2y plus 4z Let's pass it like that, right? So this is a function of x, y, and z in three parameters. This is a function in two parameters, and you can have infinitely as many parameters as you want, right? And that's what we're going to be looking at. That's the summary of what we're going to be learning today. Functions from zero parameters and to functions where we have as many parameters as the function will allow us carry. Okay, so don't be scared. It's not math we're going to do. Don't be scared. Hmm? Um, Now, okay, let me just give us some few functions, example of functions. For example, let's do a greeting function. Right, let's do a greeting function. Now, first of all, if I want to greet you, I can just run this print, right? And I can come back here and do hello. By the way, print is a built-in function for hello, right? Print is a built-in function. Like I told you, we have two types of functions, right? Two types of functions. Let me do this. Let me write create a cell below, markdown. Okay, types of functions. We have one. We have built-in, and then we have um, user-defined. Yeah, let me passing this out now. I don't even know if this is correct. Okay, user-defined functions. Now, what are the examples of built-in functions? Right, examples include print. It's a function because whenever we pass in the argument hello, what does it do? It returns, it prints hello for us, right? You can see here, if you pass in anything you pass in into this guy, right? If you tell it to print two, it will print two as a string, right? Anything you want it to print, it will print for you, right? If you tell it to print two, it will print two like this as a number. Now, if you tell it to print true, to print true, right? So anything you pass to it to print, it will print as long as it follows the rules, right? So print is a function. Another function, who can give me another function? We have the len function. Len function. What does len function do if you remember in list? It returns the number of elements in a list, right? Like this. So we can run this and then it will tell us we have how many elements we have. We have three elements in a list. We have the len function. We have the sum function, which returns what? The sum of elements in a list, right? Let's do this. We have sum. So who can tell me other functions? I have like three more to give you as basic examples that we've learned. So who can tell me another kind of function? Somebody said the define function. Okay, that is the def for that is a keyword for creating functions, right? Okay, let me see if you have any messages from the chat box. Where is it? Where is it? Where is the chat box? Somebody point me to the chat box. Okay, chat box. Okay, somebody said, yeah, input function, max function. Yeah, guys, means you've been practicing. So the input function, what does it do? Okay, thank you. Functions is not correct. I'll correct that. We have mean. Thank you. We have max. We have impute. Right. You guys are now understanding the gist. Correct. Somebody said my spelling of functions. Is it correct now? I think it's correct now. Okay, here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Those tiny little eyes. Okay. So we have max, it returns the maximum. We have mean, returns the minimum. Somebody said we have impute. So let's put in everybody's own, right? Right. So now, user-defined functions are the ones you create by yourself. And we're going to put EG here, and then we're going to leave. As much as we create by ourselves, we'll come and add the examples at the end of the class. So if I forget, please remind me. Right. So these are functions that other people have created. Can we create our own? Yes. In fact, we can create. Let's write the ones we will create. We might create the mean because we don't have anything like mean. If you come here and you put mean here, it will not work. It will display an error, except if you import mean from another library. But we don't have mean in Python, so we'll create our own mean function. So I've shown you some things about functions, right? Right. So we've also seen the range now. range, range function. Are we forgetting about it? The range. There are a lot of them, right? We can't exhaust them, at least not in this class, right? So let me run this so it saves for you, right? Now let's begin to see our user defined. Now, how do we create these functions by ourselves, right? First of all, let us see how to be able to do that using let's create a simple greet function, then we create the mean function, and then we'll use them as examples to show some things. So greet function, first of all, I can just print you know hello, right? And then I can also print this. I can collect your name first. uh Let me say Isti. I don't even know who Stevie has that name. now can print, you know, um, hello, hello ist, right? Then we run this. Oops, we have an error. Okay, H. Where did I add the H? Okay, name. Come on. Yeah, name. Hello ist. Great. So we have this now. Now we want to. Now it means if you want to greet 10 people now, it means you have to be copying this guy now. Let's do that. Let's label, right? So you have to come here and be changing ist. You have Nico, you have Harley, right? You have Hosea. So let's run this. I know I have crazy names, right? So you have this. You can see now. It means look at the lines of code we had to write just to get these guys done, right? So we are going to see how to use functions to reduce this. Now, what if we even want to print this? Print again. You are welcome, right? It means we have to copy it again. Control C. And if you remember well, with this something similar to this on loops, right? And I'm expecting somebody to ask me what's the difference between this one and loops. Now, right? You do that, then you have this. Of course. Now I'm going to explain the difference between that what we a function and a loop as we continue to go forward, right? And it's not like they are even antagonists. They are not fighting each other. No, they are just you would see how to create functions with loops in them. Oh my god. Sorry about the sorry about the noise coming. Okay, sorry about the noise coming from the background. My house can be very very noisy at times. It's why I struggle with the recording actually sometimes. Okay, like I said, we're going to see how to create a function that can do this greeting for us. So that we'll just call it once in one line, and then it does that in one line. That's the aim of functions, right? To create them and then you continue to use them over and over and over again, right? Now, um, what do you call this? So let's first do the greeting function. Now, how you create a function is you start with a keyword def. This def is a keyword that is used to tell Python, okay, just like you have the for keyword that is to tell Python, okay, we're trying to define a for loop now. Just like you have the if keyword that is going to tell Python now we're trying to check a condition before we carry out a particular operation. Just like you use the while keyword, right? You know there are no functions, they are keywords because functions collect taking arguments, right? Like print it takes in an argument, while takes in an argument, but keywords don't take in arguments. Just like the for, the while, the you know, and also the def does not take a keyword. It just tells us that we are trying to define a function, right? This is a short word for define, right? We're trying to define a function. Then you pass in the name of the function, which in this scenario, want to greet our users, right? And then when we do so, um, we don't need to pass in anything actually. We can just so is you have to pass in these brackets, just like we have function of x, right? Take it as this guy is okay. Let's even start with that f of x first. Take it as this guy is f, right? You can do this without passing in any parameter. Like I said, let's do this, and then we do this. So def f now is the name of the function, right? F is the name of the function. Whatever we're going to pass in here is called the argument, right? Let me do this before I go to the greet function. So when I do this, I can just pass in let it also return uh just print 100 for me, right? So if I do this anywhere I call f like this, anywhere I call f like this, you see that it will print 100 anywhere I call f because the function of x f is what without passing any argument it's supposed to print 100 for me. That is what it does. Now let's try to define a greet function. Don't worry if you don't understand. If you understand with time, with just a few more examples. So now we want to greet a user. Now if we want to greet a user, we can decide to greet we can decide not to pass in any parameter. Maybe it's just going to be a general greeting. So I want to print hello, right, and just stop there, right? So we run this. Now anywhere we go to now, we just need to call the greet user function like this. And then of course, okay, sorry, pass in the brackets, and then it prints hello anywhere you go to, right? If you just print this guy now, anywhere you go to. Now this is looking like you're assigning a value to a variable, right? That's not far from it. If you're passing a non-parametric function, but it's just that sometimes when you call a particular function, there can be a lot of lines in here, right? There can be a lot of commands. right? So not all functions take parameters, but most functions do take in parameters, right? So now what if I want to greet the people by their names, right? I can do a def greet user version 2. Now I'm passing this version 2 so that it doesn't override that one, right? And then I can pass in name, right? Then I can do this. Then pass in my full colon. Don't forget this. Pass in my full name. Then I come here. So here I can just do print hello, then name. Okay, let me do this. Name. Remember my F, so that this can take, any just anybody. Right. So see what I'm going to do now. This is just to greet a user. So all I need to do is when I call this function, I need to pass a person's name. That's all I need to do. So I can just come in here, greet user 2, and then pass the name. Right? Do I have a Helen in the class? If I just do this, it is going to greet Helen. Hello, Helen. Right? If I pass in this, I believe now you've started seeing the difference between this one and a loop. If I pass in Ahmed, right, a loop will continue to carry out that operation for a members of a list, for example, a for loop. But this one now you can just call it at any time with a different argument, right? And then to carry out the value, the assignment for you, right? That so instead of having to write the name of the person as a variable, then calling this, you just need to call the function and then pass in the name, right? You can also do this greet user 2, right? Then you can if you want to be extra professional and allow your work to look idiot proof, like my boss will always say. When he says idiot proof, it means everybody should be able to understand. You can pass in the name of the argument, right? Name is equal to what? Name is equal to, you write the name of the person, let's say Manny now. Yeah, so you can see now, this will do the same thing as these other guys will do. So you can decide to pass in this guy like this, right? Calling the, so that we understand the argument you're referring to. And this is particularly important when you are dealing with multiple variables, right? For example, now, let's say greet. Let's define another function, another greet user that takes in more than one argument. Greet user. And then this function now takes in name is equal to, okay, not, we're going to define this. We are passing name, and we're also collecting, what other thing can we collect about user? Quickly, okay, let's collect their age. So, right, so we can just print in this, right? Hello. Then we pass in the name of the person. Pass in the name of the person. Yeah. Then we can also print um you are, you know, age, years old. Yeah. So we have created the function. Now this is like a template. If you understand what the template is, right? A template is like, imagine the mold we used to that block producers use, right, to mold their blocks. If you understand that kind of mold, so all they need to just do is to fill it with concrete, right? All they just need to do is to fill it with concrete, and immediately they fill it with concrete, and then they hit it on the floor, right, and slightly or gently draw up the mold. What happens? We have a brick, right, or we have a block. So that is what a template is, and that is what our function is. So here now is us creating the mold, right? They have different sizes in the mold. They have this, I think they have the 6 inches, they have the 9 inches. I'm not into the construction industry, but I mean, I affect water for buildings to know the size of blocks. Right, so this is us creating the mold, right? We're going to use the mold later. This is not us using the mold, this is us creating the mold. And that is what it means to define a function. Okay, so let's do this. Let's try now. Let's create our, oh, we've created another greet user. Okay, and you know what? Some old functions have to go for others to come in. So greet user now. Let's pass in the name of the person. Now you can decide to either pass these guys out in according to order. When I mean according to order, if the name comes first when you were defining, then name has to come first when you're using the function. And if age comes next, then age has to come in after name, right? Now, this is what you do now. You can decide to just pass in Alice. Am I calling a lady's name more than I should? Then you can pass in the age, you can pass in 26. Then let's see what this does. Yeah, that was hello. Alice, you're 26 years old, right? Now you can see we can also do this for um grid user. We also have this um team. We're going to pass in, we're going to have team, and then we're going to pass you know. So instead of doing this now, this time around, I'll use this technique that I used here. I'll call these guys by their names. I will call the, I mean, parameters or the arguments by their names. I'm going to call this name is equal to team, not time. And I'm going to call age is equal to 26, right? Or let's make it 27. So this is me now expressly calling, okay, so these variables now, instead of me allowing the function to itself determine which one is, so when you do it like this, it automatically determines that the first one is supposed to be Alice and the second one is supposed to be age, right? And then, but if you do this now, if you pass in the name now, you're not stressing the computer. It already, now it is understanding, okay, so this is what Oga means, right? Because your function is actually your servant, you're the boss, right? So if you do this and you pass it, you still do the same job, right? Like we have it here, except that this time around now you're saving your function. Let's make this a markdown cell. A markdown cell. If I want to calculate mean, if I have numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 10, right? Then what do I do? I have to first find the sum of the numbers, right? So this will be 1. I mean, this will be 1 plus 2 plus, dash 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 plus 10, right? Then divided by what? Divided by 10. If you count these numbers entirely, I think they're up to 10. Okay, now add spaces. Thank you. Over 10. You mama, add space, stop. Add space. And then you look. Okay, thank you. I think this guy understands better what I want to do. So this is the sum of these guys divided by a number. And then what is the sum of numbers from 1 to 10? And that will be, what will be the sum? That should be 55, right? That will be 55 divided by 10. I might be mistaken, actually. But if I am wrong, we'll see it when we define our function, right? So 55 divided by 10, what will it give us? Let me say mean here is equal to this. Now, which will be equal to this. Then this is, I mean, this is for numbers. This is for when we have a range of numbers, right? But when we are having problems that have to do with you know intervals, right? The way to calculate their mean is different. So we're just talking about the normal mean, just what you teach just one student, right? So this will be 5.5 or 5.5, right? Okay, so let's try to implement this using a function, or let's just do it using code, plainly using code. So first, what do? We pass in the list of our numbers, right? So let's call them nums. Of course, I can just use the range function and the list to create this. I want to believe you understand this. If I do this 1 to 11 now, of course, you know that it is going to create numbers from 1 to 11, or from 1 to 10 rather, right? Of course. Now, so let's calculate the sum of numbers, right? So sum of nums will be equal to what? Sum nums. This sum nums is actually I'm just trying to tell you that this is the sum of numbers, right? It is a variable holding the sum of nums, because the sum of nums will return to us what the sum of all these guys together, right? That's what I'm saying. Or if you are not comfortable with this, you can just call it I don't know if you call it S norms. I don't know. Just let's just leave it as some norms. This is telling you that this is just a variable I created here, right? Well, this is a function I'm calling to calculate the sum of numbers. You see how I'm using a built-in function, right? Now, let's try to print our sum of numbers and see if I was correct earlier on. Yay, I was correct. Yeah, so for people who don't know how to use it, I think I use AP, right? Okay, so now the next thing after you're done with this is to be able to divide this guy, right, by the number of numbers in this list. Divide it by this, right? But you can just easily pass in your 10. But what if the number changes, right? What if the number changes, right? That is when we need to use another function to be able to dynamically calculate the number of numbers. Let me just pass in this guy, sum of nums. So I'll just do number of numbers. Let's put it that way. I just want to make programming fun. Nums for it to mean number of numbers, right? So we're going to use the function, the len function, which will go into a list and count the number of numbers, right? And we'll pass in the nums. So we have two of the things we need to calculate a mean. We have the sum of the numbers, and we have the len, that is the number of numbers, right? So our mean will just be equal to what? Well, let's do mean norms, right? So that we don't override. In case if we have any function called mean, we don't override it, even though we saw that we don't have, but we're going to create one. So we're going to have mean norms. It's going to be sum norms divided by norms. And then this will give us the mean. So let's see what the mean give us. Let's see if we're correct. Correct, 5.5. So this is a way to do it. Now imagine that if we have another list to calculate. So it means we have to come and copy this guy now like this, Control C. Come here, V, and then we'll now try. Okay, let's try numbers from 1 to 9. Right? Then we now run. We find out it's 4.5. If we want to run that one, we'll still come back here. Can you understand? Do you understand now why we need functions? It's not like these guys will not be able to do it, but we'll be working with plenty of lines of code, right? So instead of doing that, we can bundle them into a function, right? And then how do we recreate this guy now in a function? We can just come here and then start with def keyword, of course. We can just pass in our mean, right? Because we don't have a function called mean, so we are free to pass in this, right? Or you can call it average if you want. We also don't have anything called average, right? And then you can open it. Then you're going to pass in a function. You're going to pass in we can call this x, or you can call it norms, right? Or you can call it, I don't advise you calling them list like this, because list is a function, so that you don't temper with what is a function, right? But we'll just leave it like this. Sorry. So we have this, then I'm just going to go ahead and create this function. So what do we need first? Right, already the user is going to pass in a list of numbers, right? So we already have this guy here. So what we need to calculate now is the sum, right? So I'm just going to calculate the sum, and I'm going to put a little underscore, and I'm going to leave it like that, right? Why I'm doing this is that this is already not the same thing as this sum, right? So I'm just going to do the sum is equal to, I'm just differentiating with this one so that I don't overwrite. You remember what we did the other time in our first class when we tried to assign a value to print. Our print function stopped working entirely, right? So that's not what we want now. So we're going to calculate the sum of norms, right? And then we're going to calculate also the number of numbers, right? You can call it the count. Then we can call it the len, right? Norms, right? Then we can just go back and print, right? We can go back and print. Okay, before we do that, let's calculate the mean. Now the mean is going to be, you don't have to do this in a function. I'm just kind of, okay, you can do it sum of norms. Let's do it this way. Sum norms, count norms, so that I don't confuse you. Mean norms, like we have it. And then this is going to be what? Sum norms divided by count norms, right? Yeah. So now I'm just going to print the mean of the numbers here. Beautiful. Now I have done the hard work of doing that. So anywhere I just go to, I just need one line of code to call these guys to come and work. Just need to calculate mean. I can just create a range. If you want, you can create the range, the numbers outside. Or if you like, you can just have them inside, right? Beautiful, right? And then here, the beautiful thing is that you can still use the range function directly. Here, you can just calculate the range if you want. Range here, 1 to let's say 100. Then to still give you the mean. Exactly, to still give you the mean, right? So this is actually not 1 to 100. This is 1 to 99, right? This will give you 50 as the mean, just like we saw 1 to 9 giving us the mean, right? So why am I emphasizing on this all the more? I'm emphasizing on this because functions are things that you will need to learn how to write them as much as you need a clean code, right? You can see instead of having these guys just taking up space, you can see just these guys now are not even fitting to my screen, even though I know I have zoomed, right? But you can see the entire, these guys are fitting from the definition itself to, the calling of the two functions. They are within my screen, and I can still even add a few more, right? So that's why you might need functions, right? To be able to call them, and you can call them anywhere. If you like, you can add as many cells as possible. Anywhere you call them, they will work. As far as there was a definition before, right? So this is what we call function definition, and this is what we call function calling. You're calling the function to come and work, right? After you've defined the function, you call the function to come and work. That's what you're doing. So defining function is like building a template that anything you pass through must follow to come and do it. And writing a function also means to take a set of codes, a block of codes like these guys now, and then give them a name, right? For reusability. I know some of us that went through computer science classes, you'll be hearing things like functions are beautiful, are used, sorry, functions are used for, am I actually making sense? No. I think I was going to say we use functions for reusability of codes. We give names to block of codes. So this is what it means, right? For codes to be reusable, or for you to give a block of codes name. And functions can be as simple as this, and they can go as complex as this, more complex than this. All we need from you is to just know that, to just be able to write your functions. Forget about what the kind of crazy functions other people will want to write, right? All we just need you to do is to be able to write your own functions, right? So I don't know. I don't want you to write function that will be able to calculate these norms, but I'll just give you 5 minutes. I want you to just create a function that will take any number and add 10 to it. Is that nonsense you can do? That can take any number I pass into it. Not necessarily, not a list actually. Not a list. That can take in any number in you get. Just like, imagine you have a function like this, f of x, that if I pass in any value as x, it will give me the number plus 10. Right? If you can do that, I will be very, very happy to see that. Is that something you can do? If you can do that, just give it a try. Let me see. Give it a try. I will still be here to check. Thank you, Fawaz, for your definition. Fawaz, I'm not even going to call you except for this one because I know you're supposed to have done that. So I'm giving you 5 minutes. So I will just see what you can do. Just make mistakes, be wrong. Just make sure that you post it. I want to see it in the WhatsApp platform, just so that I know that we are together. These things are that we've already covered. We've covered almost half of what we're supposed to do during the week. We've covered almost half already. So we're just going to go through our book and then see some things, and then we'll just be scrolling through, then see other things like passing in default values, different number of arguments, and the rest, right? So I just took my time to just explain some things verbally to you of what functions are. So I need you to just create a function now that'll be able to take in any number and add 10 to the number, then print the number back. So try it and let me see. Exercise first. Okay, let's go into our book and see how much we've learned already. Like I told you, we've learned a lot, right? Um, this is a simple message that can display a greeting message to the user, right? Then you just need to call greet user, then it prints hello. We've done that. We've also seen how to greet a person with their names, right? And then this arguments and parameters, this is just an anatomy of that. That is, right? If you read this place, you understand the differences between what an argument is and what the parameter is, right? So the variable name, right, username in the definition is an example of a parameter, right? The piece of information, right? This. So if you have this, what is a parameter? I think let's just try to clear this out, right? So if I here this now, if I have this function on greet user, right? The name here is what we call a parameter, right? Then here, what the value I pass is what you call the argument, right? So here, this is a parameter, right? So this is a parametric function, right? Or a function that takes in arguments if you want to call that. So we call them parametric functions. There are non-parametric functions like these ones that do not take in values, that do not take in parameters, that do not take in arguments rather, right? So this is called the parameter, while the value we pass in is called the argument. Okay, let's continue scrolling. Positional arguments, like what I told you earlier, when you have more than one argument, right, you can pass them positionally. We call them positional arguments. I didn't want to call the buzzword so that I won't be confusing you, right? So we call them positional. It means if you're passing, the animal type is hamster, the pet name is Harry, right? So it's a hamster, but we call it Harry. I think this is a dog. I don't even know what is a hamster, right? We're in a class. I have data. Let's check. What is a hamster? Let me know the pet that is called hamster today. Please don't laugh at me. If you know it, why are you even in this class, first of all? Okay. Okay, this is the hamster. Oh, wow. This looks like a rat. Come on. Okay, stop calling it one Japanese name. Okay, that was a hamster, according to what they said. So you have a hamster, and the pet's name is what is Harry, right? Just like we have dogs, and then we call those dogs, we give them names, right? That's exactly how we have these guys. So, um, what do I call this now? This now you need to pass this exactly as they are here. The pet name should be hamster, the name should be Harry. If you dare invert them, you're on your own, right? So you can we have multiple function calls, right? This is where you call the function. You can see this is the first time they called it, they also called it again. And let's see what happens before we look at the answer. Let's say we have this greet user two. Now let's do greet user. Let's copy this guy. No, the right one. Copy it, and then let's bring it here as well. Let's create two of these guys, then let's run them. You can see it did first for Alice, right? So if you have two functions, you can call them all together and they will still perform independently, right? That's multiple function calls. You're just calling the function multiple times with different arguments. Even if you call it with the same arguments, for example, I still passing this guy to print three times. The first one for this, second one for this, and then third one for the last one. So that's what we call multiple function call, right? Let's keep scrolling down. Then other matters, like I told you, here they decided to change. You can see instead of the pet name to be the second one, now the pet name has become the first one. Remember, the pet name is Harry, the animal type is hamster, right? So they changed, and then what will happen if you say I have a Harry, my and the Harry's name is hamster. So that's exactly why if you change the position of arguments without specifying the parameters, you would have issues. Now keyword arguments is what we did, the solution, right? So that when even if you change the order, it will still work the same way. You have the animal type is this, and then the pet name is this. So even if you change the order, as far as you specify the argument and the parameter, right, you don't have issues, and we saw that already, right? Then we have default values. Okay, this is where we're going to start now. Now there can be some parameters where there are some things where you can just pass in default values. For example, let me um, let me do this. Let me copy this function, create user. Let me just create this function and give it the default value. Okay, so I have this function now, right? Now I can pass in a default value for this. I can just give it a name. I can give it a default name, money. Right. So if you don't pass your name, it's my name that is going to be printed. So let's run this. If you greet user two, and then you pass in my name. Sorry, you pass in your name. Job. You run this. Of course, it's going to greet Job. So what it has done here is that if you pass in an argument, right? If you like, you can come and give it a name here, right? If you pass in an argument, what it will do is that it will come and override this value here. To override. When we by overriding, we mean replacing. To come and replace this one, to come and push this guy away, then it will take the position. But let's say per adventure, you didn't pass in a value, right? Create user two, and then you just pass in this guy, it will just greet me directly, right? So you can also just pass in just in space here, just a space, right? Just a space, and then let's see this, right? And then it will just give you hello without this. So if you don't want to have issues like this, you can just pass in just a normal space like this, and then or you can just pass in user, right? Hello user, right? Hello user. So that is a default value. Now default values are used for common. There are some cases where um let's say you want to greet a person and then you want to collect his name, you want to create a function. They have this function that will return the full name of a person, right? A function will return the full name of a person. All the person needs to do is to enter their name, and it will return the full name of the person in the way we want it to, right? And let's say we want surname first, but then we'll just collect your first name, f name for first name. Then we have surname. Let me write it as s name. Then we have maybe m name, that is for middle name, right? So now if you do this, okay, let's make middle name come to the middle, right? Even though the order does not really matter, it's how we use them in the function, right? If we do this, we can decide to come here and then do print full name. Okay, let's do this. Let's call this guy now full name is equal to, you can see I'm trying to create the difference between this guy and, let's just call it name here. So we call the name now will be equal to, let's use the f parameter calling this guy. So what name do you want to call first? You want to call the S name first, right? Oops. S name first. Yes. Then your, let's say after your surname, and we want to pass your first name. I don't even know if that's how they do it too. Then we pass in your last name. Sorry, your middle name. That's how some people do it. Right? Let's say that's how we want your name to always be, right? And why when is this function very, very important? Let's say you want students, you want to display the names of students the way you want on the website, on your website, right? And you don't want them, if you tell them enter name, some of them might mix the name. In fact, their middle name can come first. Some of them, their middle name will be in the middle. Some of them, they are, so you might not be able to trace which one is which. That's why most forms, if you're filling, if the order of name matters, they will ask you of the name separately, right? And maybe if they are printing your certificate, they will create, what do you call it? They'll create the certificate with the order with which they want. So that's how they think, right? So don't worry, we're thinking in data, right? So we want to print your name, and let's see if this function works. Let's just do full name. Then we copy, we write in some blessing, passing. What is the middle name? Milka. This is the surname. Ibrahim. Remember, if you're doing this, if you're entering them like this, the order matters. Very, 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 very important. If you don't want to use the parameter argument parameter entry, you can do this, but then maintain the order. So if we do this, it returns the full name, Ibrahim Blessing Milka, and that is how we want it to be. Surname first, first name, then her middle name, or other names if you want. So now, why am I very, very particular about why did I bring up this example? Is because I want to show us that we can pass in default values, right? So not everybody has a middle name. I don't have a middle name. So will you people now force me to have a middle name? And not everybody understands that you can just pass in empty space. For me now that understands, right? I can just come here, copy this guy, and then add a cell below, paste. Then I can just come. If I don't have a middle name, I can just come here, just print this. It will just print this for me, right? And I do not have a middle name. I'll just pass in an empty string. That is me that understands programming. And not everybody understands programming, of course. Not everybody understands programming. So now how do we solve the issue of not everybody understands programming? We have to come and pass in a default argument. So instead of making the user enter this, you can just pass in a default argument, right? So what do we do now? We can come and pass this here. Can come and pass middle name. We pass the default value for the middle name, right? So when we do this, even if the user did not enter anything for the middle name, it will still be able to print surname. It will still be able to print the guy. Except that when we run this code now, we're going to have a little problem. Why? Because this guy is expecting that if you are passing default values, hmm, the default values must be the last element, the last what do you call them? Parameters. No, parameters, arguments. Yeah, parameters and arguments. Yeah, so these are arguments, right? This is a parameter, this is an argument. It will take us a while before we get to understand that, right? Anyway, don't worry, just understand what I'm trying to say. You get the nomenclature later. So what I'm saying is that if you're passing this guy, if you're passing any default value, it cannot be in the middle of values that do not have, I mean, um, parameters that do not have default values, right? If you're passing a default value to any parameter, they must be at the extreme right, right, or at the end. So I'm just going to cut this guy, then I'm going to add a comma and bring this guy here. So remember, we told you that what do you call them? Order does not matter, right? So as many arguments as you pass in. Now after this one, if you're passing age now, you must be able to pass. You must pass age with an what do you call it now? With an argument. Sorry, with a default value. If you don't, it will throw an error again, right? So that's why the error. So parameter without a default value follows parameter with a default value. Can you see? Parameter without a default value follows parameter with a default value. Okay, let's do this. Okay, yeah, this works. So I think it's either you have them here. Do they work at the beginning? Let's check. Let me see. Yeah, so I guess the English, where the interpretation is what they're trying to say is that parameter that has default values, right, comes after this guy. I don't know if I understand that kind of English they were trying to say earlier, but if we call this now full name, and then I just pass in blessing, right? And I pass in Ibrahim. Even if I don't pass in this guy, automatically it will print this guy for me, right? Automatically it just does that for us, right? So now if I go ahead now to pass in any value, maybe I pass in the milker, what happens? It adds milker to it because the default value we have given it here is just a space, right? And I think let me check. What if we try none? What if I pass in just anything without none? Okay, you can see it prints none, so none does not work here. Empty string it is. Just try out some ridiculous things with this guy. Let's see what we get as our results, right? So this is when you pass in default values. There are times where you pass in arguments, sorry, parameters that have default values together with those that don't have default values, right? So when you do so, the ones that have default values must come at the end of the parameters you're listing, right? That's all about default values, right? And then we have equivalent function calls. It's just telling us that, um, in this equivalent function call, whether you pass in the name of the animal type or you don't pass it, right, is still almost the same, right? This is equivalent function call. Now, equivalent function call is saying, right, you're defining pet name and you're passing in a default value. So if you do this, if you just pass in the first argument, that is the pet name, is fine, right? Whether if you don't pass in the animal type, automatically it assigns dog to it, and we just saw it here, right? We just saw it. There was it. At first, I didn't pass this guy. Let me see. When I did this, you can see when I did this, it's the same thing as when I do this, right? It's the same thing as when I do this, and then I pass in, m name, then I put milka, right? Let me come here. Yeah, that was what I was trying to say, right? So you can do this. This is an equivalent function call, right? What I'm saying is that you don't really have to pass in the m name, right? You don't really have to pass in the m name, but let's say this name here is milka. If this name here is milka, if I know that everybody's middle name, that this is not a good example. If I know that everybody's middle name is milka, I can come here and I can print this without adding milka, and then it will automatically add milka to this. And then if I still print this guy, it will automatically add in milka. And then this is an equivalent function call, right? Beautiful. That is what an equivalent function is trying to teach us. You can check in some more examples to be able to understand what we have in there. Then avoiding argument errors. Of course, we just saw one here where um, we try to bring in default value in between a parameter that has default values in between parameters that do not have default values, right? And another error we saw is swapping these guys when we are not giving them names, right? For example, you're not specifying animal type is equal to this, pet name is equal to this, right? And you're just swapping them, right? Or maybe there are cases where you need arguments and you're not passing. For example, you remember our main function that can calculate the mean of these numbers, which is going to be 2.5. Now, if I just call in the main function and I don't pass in anything, it will throw an error. It is expecting one argument, right? Except if the argument inside has a default value. For example, remember here where we by default we just pass in user, right? So when we don't greet, it automatically takes the default value as user. But if your functions do not have, if your parameters do not have default values, and then you call this guy without a parameter in it, it will throw an error, right? This is one of the errors. There are so many errors. Of course, some of them you'll be the ones that will discover them. Some of you discover Mungo packaging for us, right? So you have all of these guys. Then return value. Is return value even a new thing? Not necessarily, but it can be confusing at times if you don't understand them. I believe some of us have seen functions and some functions that have return values. And so we're going to define our main function again. Because of time, we're just going to copy this guy. You know what? I'm just going to define the main function in a shorter way now. Def, then I have mean. Let me call this mean 2, right? Or let me call this another mean. And then another mean is also going to take in a list called norms, right? I'm just going to return this if you like. Okay, let me take you step by step. I can actually come and do this. I'll just copy this guy. I'll do this in two ways. And why I'm doing this in two ways is because some codes will not be writing them explicitly like this, right? So I can just come here. I will just call this another mean, right? So another mean with some norms, count nums, right? Of course. So what we're going to do here is instead of printing the numbers, we're going to return them, right? We're going to use the return keyword, and then we're going to tell you what to return. And we want it to return the mean of nums, like this, of course. So now, the difference between print the mean and return the mean is two things, right? This return, let me run this, then b another mean. Let's call this another mean. Another mean. I can call in list of numbers. Yeah. So do this. Oh, sorry, another mean, not a mother. Come on. Thank you. It still calculates the mean for us, but this time around, you can see this print, right? And it looks the same thing as let's even bring in our mean so that we can create more confusion. B mean. Let me collect the same values, right? So you can see all of them is on 3.5, but there is a difference, right? So here I can decide to check the type of this guy. Let's check the type of this guy. It's a non-type because I mean, if you come here, if you try and you see, let's say if you try let's say n is equal to this guy, you do this, you can see n is equal to, let's go down, let's try to print n. You can see n is not even holding any value because what we did not tell the function to return any value that n is going to hold. What we told the function to do is to print the value of 3.5, right? So when you don't need to use, when you're not going to use the value produced by a function, you can use the print function. If you just want to display the value, fine, you can just use the print function. But if you want to use the value in subsequent calculation, maybe you want to check if the mean of the number is this, you want to compare further and see if the mean is greater than 10, then you can say this. Maybe let's say you administer test to students and the test is over 20, and you want to know if the mean is greater than 10, so that you can be able to assess how successful your students were. So you can be able to say if the mean of this course is greater than 10. So if you're going to use it further in some calculations, you need to use the return. Because let's see what the return does in this case. Let us do n is equal to this. You see that the return will not even print any value. But then the n has a value now. You can see n now holds the value of 3.5. So that's one key difference. And there are times where after we have defined the function, we will need to use the value produced by the function. That is when we'll use the return keyword. But if we just want to display the answer, we'll use the what? The print keyword. That is just the difference between printing the value and then returning the value, right? That's just the difference, right? So, of course, like I told you, if you need to return a value, fine. But the return is the best thing because in the return you can still print the value, right? You can still print the value if you want in the return. So I will always advise you to use the return, but of course, if you don't want to use the return, you can just use the print since you are most familiar with the print. But most of the times we're going to be using the return if we need to use the values elsewhere, right? Okay, now I'm returning a simple value, as you can see, returning a simple value, making an argument optional. I think we did that already, if I'm not mistaken. Did that? I'm not sure. Yeah, so returning a dictionary, you can also do this. It's just returning, guys, just returning things, right? So, so you can see, okay, making a value optional is just them using an if statement, and I'm not going to run this code. I'm just going to explain it to you. So you can see here, instead of them just printing these guys with the return, you can still do it. You remember this function that we wrote here, this function where we collected three names here. Hmm? Remember this function that we wrote here that could take in a default value. Now, since this value can, since this guy can take in a default value, if you want, you can decide to come and use if statements for this one. You can decide to say, okay, if the middle value is not provided by the user, do this. If else, you can do this, right? Now you can come here and check what they did here. So if middle name, that is, if middle name is not empty, then do this. If middle name is empty, do what? Return. You can see what they did. Full name is equal to this. If middle name is not okay, let's do it so that I will not be saying grammar, but we'll just go ahead and copy this guy. So now let's check. Before we do that, let's just try something. If, let's see this empty string now, if this print hi, let's see if this works. So you can see is whenever you have an empty value here, it's seeing it as if the string is empty, it's in the string as, what do I call it now? It's in the string as false. Remember what we spoke about? Even an empty list like this, right? It's in it as false. So even an empty string is in it as false. Let's try to pass in, even if it's a space. You can see if it's space, okay, print here. So it means it worked because it discovered that we have is a character here. But if you pass in just an empty string, right? So this guy is seen as a false. So here what they did is just they just came here and they said if, so let's pass in this guy here. If our name, sorry, if our middle name, m name, right? So this means that if the middle name remains like this, blank, like this, without anything in it, then the name should be like this, right? And then, but else, if the middle name is passed, that is, if it is passed, else, what do we do? We can just copy this guy like this. That is, if the middle name is not passed, then there is no need to add the middle name in the first place, right? Then we can do this. And why are we doing this? If we want to return this value, I'm going to show us two things now. We're going to return this value. So now if I put full name, put full name, you're going to judge two things now. And you're passing, let's still passing the same name. Lesson. Oops, in a bracket, please. Blessing. What do I have? What do I pass as the surname? I pass in Ibrahim, right? And then I pass in okay, let's say I don't pass in anything, right? And then I run this. Of course, you can see the name. You can see what it printed. Ibrahim Blessing. Now see the difference now. Let me create another function. Let me create another function. Guys, I'm so sorry for the noise. Why didn't I copy all of these guys? Okay, so I have these guys now. Now, the difference I want to show you without using the if, right? What if you don't use the if? See what will happen if you don't use the if in this case. Before, remember, before we were just printing values. So if you want to display values, right, whether there is space or not, it does not really matter. But look at what will happen here. Now we're just doing it directly the same way, right? I'm just going to copy this guy now after definition, right? Let me run this. So you can see here. Can you see this one has a space here? You can see the space. Now see this one, it does not have space. Now why do we have space here in this one is because we added a space before the m name. So even though the m name is blank, it added this space here. So the name will come with a space, which means the data engineer will have an extra function of stripping white spaces. So it will have an extra work of stripping white spaces, or it will create unnecessary white spaces, right? So that's why sometimes you might just need to use the if function, but it's not really, it depends on what you want to achieve in the end, right? So look at the problem you have at hand and then try to look for a greater solution. So we've seen all of these guys. Returning a dictionary is not really difficult. It's just knowing, okay, so if he prints this, this is what I'm going to return, right? For example, we're just returning the name but in a dictionary. I'm still going to copy. I have that function copied already. Oops, no, I don't have it. Let me use, I think this is it. Yeah, so here now what I have is I want it to, let me just take in the first name and the last name now, and I want to return a dictionary, right, of the names. Now what I want to return is why am I putting this in bracket? You don't need to put it in bracket, guys. So what I just want to pass is I want to pass a dictionary, right? So let's call it name dictionary. I want to just create a dictionary. Remember what we did with the dictionary, right? I want to create a dictionary with first name as key, then the value as what, as the value that the person passed in, right? My f name here, right? Then I'll add the next one, and I'll add surname as name. So like this. So what is going to return now is the name dict, right? We want it to return the name dict. It's just, these guys are just examples that they're just showing us that you can actually return anything. You can return anything, a string, a value, a dictionary, right? You can do this. And then if I decide to come here and I do full name, and then I pass in no, let's just use blessing, right? And then I pass in the surname, this one. Then I do this. It is going to return a dictionary with first name, blessing, surname, the a grind of things. Using a function with a while loop. You can also use a function with a while loop, right? And this is us using, you remember while true, we collect a person's first name, we collect a person's last name. Of course, I'm not going to run this function, you're going to run it yourself. After you've created a function, this is a function that will get a person, that will return a person's formatted name, right? But this will run over in a loop, right? So you're calling it here, you're collecting the person's name using the input command. First name, you're collecting the last name using the input command. Then what do? You pass in the names you've collected to the get formatted name function. It's just our full name function. Or yeah, that function that we wrote, right? And then each time you now come here, this guy will just print hello for you and then return the formatted name, right? To just print hello and the formatted name, and then it will continue to do this. So this will continue to do, and because this is while true, there is nothing that is going to stop this function from running, except if you decide to introduce a break somewhere. Remember from the last class, right? If you don't add a break statement, this while loop will continue to run. And this, my assumption is that you're already done with your week 6. But if you're not done with your week 6, you can just go back through you can go through your week 6, and when you're done, you'll be able to understand the while true statement, and then you can, of course, uh try this exercise out and see what you get, right? But it's all about trying. And then now we're introducing the quitting statement. We're introducing that thing that will help us to quit if we don't want to continue, right? That's also another example. You can just look at it. 8.8. Then passing a list into a function. We've already seen how to do that. Then modifying a list in a function. Now, modifying a list in a function tells us that if you pass in a list in a function, the list will change, except if you copy the function, right? Let me say, let me try this out. So let's say I have nums, and I just have numbers 1, 2, 3, right? 1, 2, 3. If these were the numbers I have, then I pass them through a function. Let me define a function. Let's call the number the function squares, right? Then which takes in a list of numbers, right? And then what does it do? It just and then I can now say nums. Let's say is equal to nums. Okay, it's equal to, remember list comprehension. We can just do x power 2 for x in x. This is us trying to say for every element that will be in this list, we want to square it, right? X power 2 for x in x. We've done this as a list comprehension before. So what do we want to do now? We can just say, okay, we want to return okay, do we even have to do this as nums? Yeah. Okay, so let's not even use this example. Let's use dot pop, right? Let's just use dot pop. So let's say we are just removing let's just do pop. You can continue with the square example anyway. Let's just do, we're trying to pop values. We want to remove values, right? So what do we want to do with the remove values? So we want to come here and then try to do nums dot pop, right? We'll just do nums dot pop. That is what we want to do in the function, right? Then we want to print nums. That's what we just want to do. So this function, what it will do is that it will take anything we pass in, any list we pass in, it will take, even if whatever list here, it does not have to be nums, right? It can be anything. Can be anything. Any, you can call it LST LST, right? But then what the function is doing is actually removing an element from the list, and then it's returning the element with the last guy removed. So you can say pop values. You can just say pop values, and then you can pass in a list 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, right? Then we run this guy. So we have pop values 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Pop values 1, 2, 3. Oh, now you can see what happened to this. It was able to remove the last guy here, right? And then it returned. Now look at what will happen now if I'm using. You remember my nums list, right? My nums is 1, 2, 3. Now see what will happen after I run this function. Pop values. Then I pass in my nums. Then I run this. It returns 1, 2, right? But let me run my nums now. You find out that my nums has been affected permanently, right? So what happened to this guy when I ran these pop values to norms to give me a new list, right? I wanted it to actually give me to print out a new list, with the last element removed, but then it affected these norms. So if you don't want it to affect the norms, you can do one of the things we did earlier on in our previous classes. You can do the dot copy. Let me initialize norms again here. um so you can do this, right? Norms is equal to this, and then we have our values. This this is also affected. So you can come in here and do this. Remember the dot copy, or we do this, right? This creates a copy of norms list so that norms is not affected, right? So let's do this now and then see the differences. So we can see norms is still the same way we created it here, right? But then this has printed a list, a different list now, but without the last value, right? A list that the last element has been popped, right? So that is just an example that they're trying to show us that if you are passing a list into a function, right, be very, very careful about how you pass a list, especially if you're going to use the original list. If it involves anything like modifying the elements, it's better you pass in a copy of the list, right? So you can do this, or you can do the dot copy, right? And you do this, it's still fine, but just make sure that you do not just pass in the list. Be very, very careful when you do that, right? So in the previous examples that we did to calculate the mean, there was nothing that was going to affect the original list because we were not doing any modification function. We were just calculating the sum, the count, and then the mean. But if you are doing anything that is going to affect, maybe you're removing or you're adding, it might affect the original value of the list, right? Or if you're sorting, it will affect the original list. All of those things. So you just need to you have to create a copy if you don't want it to affect the original list, or to stay at the safer side, right? Especially when you're not sure whether you're going to need the list later on or not. So it's 5 already, so we'll just stop here. I think we just have if you go through this example, you will see some of these guys where you have a while loop inside of a function, right? We saw a while loop outside of a function. Here we're seeing a while loop inside of a function. Go through the example and then see if you have any issues. You can reach out to us. But these are just common examples, of course. And then when preventing function from modifying list, of course, is going to be what? Is going to be to create a copy. Here, what it is similar to what we did last week here. If you were following us, what we did here is that we used the while loop to remove elements from a list, right? So that was what they did here. And yeah, so preventing them from modifying functions, you have your exercise. So yeah, passing an arbitrary number of arguments, right? When we say an arbitrary number, it means you're not sure of the number of arguments. So for all of the functions we've created, the parameters are countable, right? You can see all of the functions we've created is either they are taking a list, which is one, right? Or they are taking names, which is at best here is three, or at most is three, right? So all of the arguments now are known. But what if we want to create a function, right, where we do not know the number of parameters or arguments, right? It can happen like that. Let's even say we want to create another main function. Let's call it average this time around, right? Which will take in a list of numbers that we don't know, right? So instead of asking the person to enter a list, right, the person might not even enter a list, right? So we can make our program that robust that the person doesn't have to enter a list, right? Just like if you remember the sum function, if you can pass in a sum like this, you can pass it 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. You still, oops, okay. Supposed to take in at most two arguments. Sum. Oh, this is not terrible. Okay. Oh, oops. I didn't realize this. Okay, so this is an table, and where it is going to start from, that is the starting index. Those are the only two arguments there. Okay, so what I want us to do is I want us to be able to create a function where we can even just be able to pass in the average, right? And then we can just be able to pass in the numbers and to still be able to calculate the average for us. So first thing here is in the arguments, we can come in and pass usually our numbers, but this time around, since we're not expecting it to be a list, we're just expecting it to be a collection of numbers, right? We can just pass in a star before this, right? This star now is what we call hashing. Hashing is that if it takes the norms, the variables you enter, it will separate, it will like break them into, it will create like either a tuple, a dictionary, like, right? It will create like a collection of all of those guys together. So let's do this. This will now be print. We can decide to print the norms. let's just print the norms first, see what they give us, and let's call this function. This is not actually the average now. Let's do average. What do you call them? Average one, two, three. It will just print the list of, right. Now you can see that what it gave us here is a tuple, right? So it is going to hash this guy. So it is going to break these arguments that are going to enter into tuples, right? Um, let's also do this. Um, okay, so let's proceed to calculate our mean. Right, so I'm just going to do this in one line, right? I'm trusting would understand. So this is going to be sum of norms, right, divided by len of norms. Right, that's our mean, right? So that's what we're going to do. So we pass in this to give us our mean, and the mean is what, 2. Because if you sum this is 6 divided by 2, gives you, right? Yeah, 6 divided by 3 rather, it gives you 2, right? So this gives you the average. Now you can see we do not need to pass in these values as a list. It will automatically hash in the values we pass in, right? It will create a tuple norms, right? Then rather, did I say hash, right? It's going to create a tuple rather of all of the arguments we enter. Right, that was what I was trying to say. Forgive me for what I said earlier. So now let's do it with names. Let's collect def. Let's call this. Let's create a function called names that will just take in an arbitrary number of names. Let's say you want to enter the family members. Let's create this family members instead. Family members, and you do not know the we don't know the number of we don't know the size of every family, right? So we'll just leave it and we'll just call these members, right? And we don't want you to enter them as a list. We just want you to just enter them like that, right? But remember, you can just here just leave this as members and allow them to enter them as a list, right? But we don't want to stress you. We just want you to enter them, right? We are good people, so we can just use a for loop in this case to print each member of your family, right? You can just say for member in members. What should you do? Print the members of your family, right? Let it print member. Right. If we like, we can add the title so that we can make sure that it will be in title casing, right? So if I do this and I pass in two family members, right, and I do family members, then I pass in Farouk, right, and I pass in Ibrahim, then I pass in these guys. Now see what it will do to print Farouk and Ibrahim, right? But I don't know what this means, so I can just come here and say your okay print my family members or your family members are, right. And if you do this now, you see it better. Your family members are, so maybe you can come here and add it like a column. So your family members are. Now if you look at this, you might want to, okay, so I want to add like a slash n here, with numbering. I might even want to add the numbering. It's still fine. You can come here and add this, guys, right. You can add a slash n here like this. Yeah, no, say slash n slash t, so to give it tab space, right? So my family members are Farouk, Ibrahim, and this, right? If you want to add a number, so this is what you can do here. You can add this keyword here. You don't have to do this. I mean, you can add the enumerate. So what does the enumerate does is a function as well, which gives each of your family members, which gives index to each of them. And let's see this. If you have a list called enumerate, and then you pass in sorry, if you have a list and then you pass this list to an enumerate function, right? Let's see what it will do. So it will pick each of these numbers and assign them an index automatically. Look at this. Okay, so let me just do for I in enumerate. No, let me convert them to a list. Let me convert them to a list so you can see what I want, what I'm saying. Because now like this is a function, so you can see that it's not displaying any value, right? Now let's call this here function call. Let's convert it to a list and then see. Now you can see it will pick one here and then attach an index to it. Pick two here, attach an index, or what do you call a serial number if you want, and it creates those numbers serially, right? So you can optionally specify where it should start from, right? If you come, if you use a function, there's a function in Python called help. If you type help and then you type any function you want to know about, then you run this, it will show you some things about the function. and see help on class enumerate. It will just give you some explanations on what it does. So it will tell you the enumerate takes an iterable and then it takes a number where it starts from, just like the sum function, right? It also takes an iterable. An iterable is like a list tuple, something like you can iterate over, right? When I say iterate, like I mean doing a for loop. For loop is like an iteration. That's what we call them, iterations, right? So you're specifying where you're starting from. So you can see why it started from zero is because the default index is zero, right? So now your knowledge of functions is now showing you what default values are, right? So these are default values, right? And it's a built-in function. And in a short while now I'll explain to you what the module is. So here in enumerate, you can and if you type in the enumerate here, after the enumerate, you can come and specifically just type start. Where do I want to start from? If you want to start from one to list takes. Oops, sorry. This is supposed to be within the list function. Sorry, within the enumerate function, not the list function. So after the list, passing this guy. Let's see. Yeah. So let's run this. Yeah. So you can see it started from one, attaching the index. Okay. Let me do this. Aisha. Ahmed. Let's do this. And you can see he gave one to Aisha, he gave two to Ahmed, right? So that's like automatically giving an index to each of these guys that we have, right? So this is an easy way. So if you do this for remember in enumerate this, so what you're trying to do is that your here is a tuple that is created, right? So you can come here since we know that it's going to give us a list of two if we is giving us I don't want to let's call it a dictionary and we'll see something dict. It will still be able to convert these guys to a dictionary, right? Where the key is the number, right? Let's maybe we do it this way, we'll understand better from our knowledge of dictionaries, right? So from it, the key is the index, right? And then the value is actually the elements of this list, right? They are the values, while the what do you call them? The keys are the indexes. You are giving them or the serial numbers if you want. So that's the trick we want to use. So we'll come here and do for we can do from for serial number for SN comma member. We want it to print. Um, okay, let me use the F formatted. This thing F. No, F is outside, right? Like this, and this guy, since it's the member, right, is going to be here. Now we want to pass in. We want to make sure that we have a slash T. Then we also want to pass in the serial number SN, right? And then you hit this, and let's do this, right? So here you can see it's giving us what zero, Farouk, one, Ibrahim. What do you want to start from one? What do? We add an optional parameter here, argument rather, specifying that it should start from one. Right? You can see now we have it starts from one. One is Farouk and then two is Ibrahim. Very good. Now B, yeah, for next cell. Now this is what we just wanted to see is that anything you pass here, right, it will just collect them as a tuple, right? That is what we call that is when you are not sure of the number of arguments, right? Now what if you are also not sure but you want them to be collected as dictionaries, the values, right? You want them to be entered as dictionaries. You can also do this. Let's create this collect the details of people, but like in a form of a dictionary, right? Now you see us bringing something like this, right? Let's say we just want to collect the details, so let's do info, lessons info, right? And then we want to collect the details, but we don't even know what the details are. So what we'll do here is we'll pass these two stars, and this stars, the first star will collect and then return like a tuple, while this one will collect and return like a dictionary, right? But what it is expecting is that maybe we want it to print. Let's just start from printing, let's print the details. So what this guy here right here is expecting is that if we are calling the info function, right, that we pass in values, with their, what do you call them now? We pass in values as a parameter argument call. What I mean by that is that, for example, if you have a name will be equal to, then you pass in what is your name. Let's say money. Come on. Then what is your age? You can call age is equal to 26, right? So like that, if I decide to pass favorite color is equal to is it white or black? I don't even know. Let me call it black. I think that's black. Yeah, so you can see it now created the dictionary where the parameter name is now the key, and the value is now the what the argument is now the value. Parameter key argument value, parameter key argument value. Now you notice how I didn't have to put a string around this guy here. I didn't have to. Let me try putting a string here. Let's see what happens if I run this. It gives me a syntax error because it is not requiring you to start with a string. It automatically will make it a string when you do this, right? So the first one was creating a tuple when you use the first star, right? So this is for collecting lists like family members. Now, but we want to create things like details, right? And then we do not exactly know how many we want to create, we want to collect, right? You can use the double star, right? The double star before it. So this one will now expect a mapping of name, sorry, a mapping of argument and value, right? Argument is sorry, parameter equals to argument. Parameter is equal to argument, and you can enter as many as possible, right? You can even come here and add another one. Um, what do I give this now? Height. I don't even know. If this is in feet, you can just give me 34. No, 3. Am I even 3 feet? Give me 5. And now you can see added height here and give it 5, right? So this is like a dictionary, and then you can look through this. You can come here and say, okay, so you know what, guys, for let's revise dictionaries a little. So for you can decide to say for key value, right? In so since we know that details will be returned as a dictionary, we can use dot items here, right? And we can say what do we want it to do? We want it to print key, right, and then value, right? So we want it to print key. Um, let's use F formatted printing so that we have key like this, right? Then we have value like this. Now let's take this out. Don't need you anymore. Let's run this. Yeah, let's try this. Yay! We have name and in each sentence color. Right. So this is all just creating a function that anybody can enter arbitrarily anything they want. Arbitrarily, right? So this is functions. Right. So we've learned a lot of examples today, a lot of use cases, right? So it's just us, it's just the time, it's just when we start going really into for those of us that might go into development or that might go into different spheres of life, you encounter all of these things I'm showing you, right? Some of the tutorials you will go to online, you will not find the explanations as detailed as what I'm giving you now. That's why I'm taking my time to, and that's why we even started this training in the first place. If you could get YouTube videos that could explain as deep as we're explaining here, then there will not be any need for this video tutorial. I have taken a lot of courses on Python. I cannot count, right? But I've come to find out that a lot of videos we watch on YouTube are like mirage. You watch a video, but yet you can't still carry out the programming task. Why? Because you just taught you at the periphery, right? So somebody can teach you functions in less than 10 minutes in a YouTube video, but we don't teach you like that here. We teach you, we give you a lot of information you need to, so that as you're going out there, when you code, people will see your code and they will know that, okay, this is not from regular YouTube videos. And then you'll be able to see some codes and be able to understand them, right? That's the difference between someone who does learn from books, sorry, someone who does learn from YouTube videos, and someone who actually paid the price to learn from books. That's why we're learning from a book, right? So sometimes it might get boring, just hang in there. Just hang in there. Even if it gets boring, just hang in there, right? So here, mixing positional arguments and then arbitrary numbers, right? So if you're passing in arbitrary numbers, if you're not sure, for example, now here is the size of pizza and then here is the toppings, right? Let's do family size, and then you want to pass in, oh, let's say whatever it is that you want to pass, right? Whatever it is that you want to pass, let's say you want to pass the name of your family, and then you want to pass in the details of the family. Let's do this. We have family members 2. Let's say that's the name of the function, right? So want to do the name of family name, want to do family. Some of you have family name already, right? Like me, I came from a remote place, and then we have family name, right? Then now we have members, right? Members. For some of you can do for your church, you can put the name of your church and then you pass in members or whatever association you're in there, right? So you can just come in here, family. Sorry, this will now be we can just, you remember the statement we printed, we can just print something here. Print family. Should I make this family? Members, let's have this, of that particular family, right? right? So okay, let's do this. Members of family name. Remember passing your F here. So that, oops, not here, here. Yeah, members of this family are, oops, why am I writing this outside of the string here, right? Remember what I did earlier on? I will just go ahead and let's go ahead and copy this. Yeah, forgive me for time's sake. Let's go ahead and copy this guy here, right here, and then just bring it here, right? The numeric keyword. So we are not now, right? So am I supposed to be? Oops. Okay. I think everything is set now. Now I just need this to go back inside. Now for serial number in this, I think I have everything here. Yeah. So I can just family name, members. Yeah, I think I can just go ahead and run this. And I can just call, forget about the red lines. I think it's just grammatical error. It's telling me that those words are not recognized to family members. Right. So if you pass in family members, it needs you to pass in your family name. So let me pass in my family name. Please don't laugh. If you're laughing, I have a special problem with you. By passing, so I'll just pass in some of the members of the family, right? So it will automatically detect that the first argument means the family name. Every other, oh, you can come here and pass in family name. You don't even need to pass it, just right. You don't need to. So whatever things you pass afterwards will be taken as family name, right? So let's pass in myself. Let's pass in my siblings, right? Yes. So let's just run this. Now you can see, oh, your family members. That was what I wanted to print. Okay, family members too. Thank you. Yeah, so you can see members of this particular clan or family name are what you can see this. Oh, let me just enter. Let me just enter our son. Yeah, you mama, if you get angry, write your family people's name there. Right. So I have this now. I'm just trying to show you how we are just reading. I just decided to print the members of my family are this and this. And you can also use this function to now print the members of your family. So automatically it takes this as the family name, as the first argument, right? Then it passes these guys as this. And so you can't carry these guys now as the first argument because you confuse this one. You will not know where to stop since you know that this one is not a defined number of, it does not have a defined an expected number of arguments that you're going to pass in. So this one comes only after something like this, a normal argument that expects only one and three, right? But you can't pass this one. If you try to pass this one before here, if you try to pass in here, what you get is what, an error. To pass in an error to tell you what family members family members missing one required keyword only. So if you are doing it like this, you will have to come here specifically pass in something like family family name equal to. Let's try this now. Now positional argument name follows this one. So it means if you're doing this, you have to come back here. I think let's try this out. Um, let's see this. Now this works, right? We can see you know okay, members of Ibrahim are this or Ibrahim family. Please just forgive me for that. So I'm just going to leave it. Now you can see that even if you're doing that, then the one that you're going to specify the name of the person has to come in the end. So this to be at the safer side, what do? You just leave this guy here, right? So that it automatically understands that. And let me see. Yeah, so that it automatically understands that family name is this, and then the other guys will just be the members of the family, right? So that's how Python understands. I'm just trying to show you. So most of the times, let me see. I will just look through some things and then show you. I think I passed something I wanted to show you. Okay, arbitrary number of arguments. Okay, so when we have this, most of the times you see us in Python, we'll call them just args, right? If you don't have a name for them, or some names might be arbitrary, you can just write agrs. You can see it here, args, right? So when you have only one star in front, we call them args. You can just pass in a name. Most of the times, if you check functions, you always see that you use these args to simplify that. Okay, so they are going to collect arguments, right? You're going to pass in an arbitrary number of arguments. So they use the word args, but it does not mean that you cannot use things like members or arg or toppings like they have here, right? So when you see for the ones that we will need to pass them in, as this guy here, right? For the ones that you will need to pass them as this guy here, you will need to do this here. Sorry, they are called quags. They're called quags. KW right? KW Maybe is this key values? I don't know, but they call them quags. You know, I really don't want to talk about that. I don't know if it's key value. I don't know, but they call them quags. So in case anytime next time you see somebody trying to write a function and then you get confused, you see quags. Just know that they are saying that they are going to collect a key value pair, or what they call a uh, parameter what's the name, a parameter argument value, an arbitrary number of parameter argument entries, right? So you're going to see that that's what they mean here. So in our own case, we still maintain, I think, details. We use details, right? If you look at our own examples. Anyway, um now we're going to continue here, storing. Okay, so this, you just pass in this guy and then check in their example and then try to finish off this exercise. I'm not going to look into that again. Now, the last thing, I know I said this is like the second time I'm saying the last thing, right? Now is storing your functions in a module, right? So all of these functions now that you've written, you can actually store them. That's one of the greatest examples of functions. You can write a function here and you can use it even in another program someday, right? So you can get some of these your programs that you've written, store them in a different file, right? And be able to bring them in someday or in another program. And that's what we call a module, right? A module is just a .py file, a Python file is what we call a module, right? So a module is just, like I said earlier, a .py file. And then now these .py files, you can bring in your functions there and then you can import them, right? So let's try this out. Let's copy some functions. Let's copy some simple functions. You can copy all of the functions you've done and take them there. But I'm just going to do main. Where's my function? I think let me copy average. Copy average. Just this. Control C. Now I will go up all the way. Okay, I don't have to go up. I can just come here, add a new. Now I will come down here. You can see here we have a Python file. It is going to create a .py file for you automatically. Or you can right click here, right, and you can create a new file automatically to create the txt file for you, and then you can create the file and put .py. Maybe let's say my modules, right, .py, right. So any .py file basically is like a module. So and then you can open this. So I can just go ahead and delete this. So you can automatically just create a Python file. You can right click, create a, okay, no, you won't have that here. You just come to this guy here and then you just click a Python file, automatically it creates one for you. Or you do it the other way I said, right? So here you can just start typing here. For me, I will just paste. You can also bring another function. Funny, by the way, it's not just one that you get to bring there. You can also bring let's check our, should we do this full name? Let's do full name that returns a value, right? So now if we do this is a module, right? So we can come back here and then we've saved this. Let's save this, Control S, save, right? So we can come here and there are several ways we can be able to import these functions that we have. So we can import the file, we can import my modules. Then we have this. When you import my modules, it will bring in everything that is here into my modules. And then in my modules, you have the average function and you have the full name, right? So you can just come here. How to call these functions is just to come here and say my modules, just like you have pandas.data frame, right? So this is like your pandas now. Import modules. Then you can do import is a keyword which brings in everything that is inside of this file, right? Import is also a keyword. So when you do so, you can just do import dot average, right? Import dot average, and then what average you want to find? You want to find, okay, average like this. Want to find the average of 5 numbers, and then we want this. It will give us 5.0, right? So it actually fetched this average function from here, right? Again, if you don't want to do this, you can also come here and use the from keyword and the import from. So you can say from this file, that is from my modules, And notice how we did not add the modules.py, right? So from my modules, you can do import average. From my module, import average, right? And this will bring in average from my module. So that directly you can just call average here, right? And then you can just pass in the values as well. And then you run this, so it gives you, right? The same thing you can also pass in what's the name of the other argument? You can pass in full name, right? And come here, you can do my from my modules import full name, right? Full name. Let me run this. Now we can say full name, right? And then we can pass in one, two, three, four. Okay, full name. We are expected to enter a name, right? Money, right? And then I pass in Noxon and I run this. So it's going to bring Noxon Money, right? It's assuming that this is the last name, right? If you not forget, so this is the last name, this is the first name, right? So it does this for me, right? Very, very good. Now, why I'm saying that we should learn how to do this is because we're going to be using other post functions. So we need to learn how to import. But then we need to also create our functions, be able to import them, then we're able to understand how to import other people's function. Right. So that's the importance. So now you have congratulations, you've created your new module. You'll be able to create your module where you and with your functions inside, right? And you're able to call them from a module. Right. So have fun with this guy. Just play around with this last part of the exercise. Copy your your whatever you call them, copy your functions and bring them here. And you can even create a new notebook and you'll still be able to copy these guys and bring them and it will still work, right? So that you understand where we're going to. Now, now you can also be able to create them as aliases. Most of you have alias names, right? On my name, instead of calling it Manasi, you can call it Mani for short, right? So you can also be able to do that. You can be able to say from my modules import as I cannot call it as AVG. I can just call it as AVG for short, right? So that I don't have to be calling average, right? And then you can just come here and say AVG L1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just to give you the result, right? That is how you do it with an alias name. Because there are some function names that are very, very long to call. For example, full name, you can just call it as FN, right? So that's how you can do it. Sometimes we call pandas as PD. You can call numpy as NP. Right? We call matplotlib as .pyplot as PLT. We can call what do you call them? We can call Seaborn as SN. You begin to see all of those things when we start data analysis proper. Right? So that's just the basic. Sorry, that's just the basic thing. Being able to give alias names, ALIS, right, or short names to variables, right? So if you read through this, this is just importing the entire module, right? Right. That is the first thing we did. Import the entire. Their own was pizza.py, so they imported the entire pizza like we did with our own. Then importing module.function name. You can use module.function name bar. In our case, we had my modules dot full name or whatever. Yeah, we did that. Go at dot average, and then you can also do from module import this. From module import this. Um, and so many others. Now, using as to give an alias name, we've already seen that. Calling it as an alias. So importing all functions. If you want to import everything there, right? Instead of saying from pizza import just one function, if you want to import everything from pizza, you can just do from pizza import star. But that's not actually advisable, right? Because sometimes you can import every function in the module and only use two or three. So, and those modules that you imported, if I'm not mistaken, they are eating up your memory. So instead of importing every function and then using only two, you can just import the one specifically you would be using. But if you use from pizza import star or from my modules import star to import every function there, so you can just call in the function directly, right? Yeah, but it's not advisable for you to do. So styling your functions, of course, you can see how to do that here. First of all, non-parametric functions, I mean those ones that you do not pass, sorry, not parametric. I mean non-default functions that do not have default values will come first before functions that have default values, right? And then you can also do this. You don't have to pass in your values until they get to the end of your screen. You can actually pass them, line after line, just like we do in dictionaries, right? Just like in this case, Let me look for one that we have a lot of variables in it. Yeah, just like here, you can pass in this guy here, comma. You can pass in this guy here, comma. Right, and this guy works. If you run this, you will still be able to work with this guy here like this, right? So it still works just for readability, right? Just for readability. And of course, we've reached the end. Now, there is also another thing. When we come next class, we will be seeing how to add a doc string to a function, right? So that you'll be able to read what the function does, right? But then, when we come next week, we'll do that. But then this is the end. So this week, you were able to learn a lot, right? You learned about functions, but it was not, if you ask me, it's not actually a lot. It's just what we knew. But this time around, we're just bringing in functions to be able to bundle, or to be able to create a name to a block of code, or which we are going to be calling and be reusing as time goes on, right? And we saw how to do that. So in this week, we were able to learn how to create functions, right? And how to be able to use these functions reusably. You were able to see functions that take in parameters and those that functions that take, yeah. We were able to see parametric functions, those that take in arguments, and non-parametric functions, those that, sorry, yes, and non-parametric functions, those that do not take in arguments, right? And that's how we round up this class. And we were also able to see how to, when we're rounding up, you also saw how to use to store up your functions in modules, just in case you want to use them in another class. Because the truth is, you might create functions that might be useful across different places. That's why we need functions. We create them in the first place, because they might be needed across various different Python files, right? As you continue to write your programs. So that's why we create functions in the first place. Anyway, do enjoy this class. If you enjoy this class, please leave a like, leave a comment. That helps us and gives us immediate feedback to know if what we're doing really, you appreciate or you understand. And in case if you face any difficulties, please just drop it also in the comment section. We'll do well to reach out to you. Thank you.